Chapter 8 of Fundamentals of Prosperity by Roger Babson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8. What Truly Counts. The greatest resources in the world today are human resources, not resources of iron, copper, and lumber. The great need of the hour is to strengthen this human foundation, and you businessmen are the one group that can do it. When it comes to the sale of goods, the same principle applies. 80% of our sales organizations are devoted to selling to 10% of the population. We have forgotten to consider whether or not goods are needed. We only consider whether or not they are being bought. You are forgetting to establish new markets, but rather are scrambling over the markets already secured. Tremendous opportunities exist in developing new industries, in creating new communities, in relocating the center of production from one community to another community to match up with your center of consumption. We have forgotten the latent power in the human soul, in the individual, in the community, in the different parts of the country. We have forgotten those human possibilities upon which all prosperity ultimately depends. I cannot perhaps emphasize this any more than by saying that the foundation of progress is spiritual, not material. The greatest resources of the world today are human resources, not resources of iron, copper, and lumber. The great need of the hour is to strengthen this human foundation and revive in men a desire to produce and a joy in service. Businessmen are the one group that can do it. They understand the emotions, understand the importance of the intangible things. They understand how to awaken in people new motives. So my appeal is not to wait too long to revive man and awaken the soul which is slumbering today. The nation is only a mass of individuals. The true prosperity of a country depends upon the same qualities as the true prosperity of its people. As religion is necessary for the man, it is also necessary for the nation. As the soul of man needs to be developed, so also does the soul of the nation. Let me tell one more personal incident. Not long ago, I was at my Washington office spending the week. While there, a little Western Union messenger girl came in to apply for a position. It was in the afternoon, about 5:30. I was struck with the intelligence of the girl's face, and asked her 2 or 3 questions. She was tired. I asked her to sit down. I was astonished to hear her story. She had been born and brought up in the mountains of West Virginia, many miles from civilization. Her father and mother died when she was 4 years old. She had been living with an old grandfather and brother. When I began to talk with her, I found her to have a most remarkable acquaintance with Emerson, with Thoreau and Bernard Shaw, and with the old Eastern writers. I said to her, "How is it that you are delivering telegrams in a khaki suit and a soldier cap?" She replied, "Because I could get nothing else to do. I lived down there in the mountains just as long as I could. I had to get to the city where I could express myself and develop my finer qualities. When I got to Washington, there was nothing that I could do. They asked me if I could typewrite, but I had never seen a typewriter. Finally, after walking the streets for a while, I got a job as a Western Union messenger." I wrote Mrs. Babson and made arrangements to have the girl come to Wellesley and work for a few months with the Babson organization. I saw in her certain qualities which, if developed, should make her very useful to someone somewhere. She came to Wellesley. About a month after her arrival, I was obliged to leave on a 2-month trip, and Mrs. Babson invited her to dine the night before I left. I told her that I was going to speak while away on America's undeveloped resources. After dinner, she went to my desk and took her pen and scribbled these lines and said, "Perhaps during your talk on America's greatest undeveloped resources, you will give those men a message from a Western Union girl." These are the lines she wrote. They are by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. I gave a beggar from my little store of wealth some gold. He spent the shining ore, and came again and yet again, still cold and hungry as before. I gave a thought, and through that thought of mine he found himself the man supreme, divine, fed, clothed, and crowned with blessing manifold, and now he begs no more. The mind of man is a wonderful thing, but unless the soul of a man is awakened, he must lack faith, power, originality, ambition, those vital elements which make a man a real producer. I do not say that you can awaken this force in every soul. If you are an employer, perhaps only a few of all your employees can be made to understand. But this much is certain. In every man or woman in whom you can loose the power of this invisible something, you will mobilize a force not only for his or her good, but for the good and perhaps the very salvation of your own business. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 of Fundamentals of Prosperity by Roger Babson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. What Figures Show. Panics are caused by spiritual causes rather than financial. Prosperity is the result of righteousness rather than of material things. The large black areas on the adjoining chart are formed by combining and plotting current figures on new buildings, crops, clearings, immigration, total foreign trade, money, failures, commodity prices, railroad earnings, stock prices, and politics in order to give a composite view of business in the United States. When Interstate Commerce reports of earnings of all United States railroads became available, January 1909, this record was substituted in place of the earnings of 10 representative roads which had been used previous to that time. Revised scales for monetary figures were also introduced in August 1912. The line XY represents the country's net gain or growth, based on the economic theory that action and reaction are equal when the two factors of time and intensity are multiplied to form an area. The sums of the areas above and below said line XY must, over sufficiently long periods of time, be equal, provided enough subjects are included, properly weighed and combined. An area of prosperity is always followed by an area of depression. An area of depression, in turn, is always followed by an area of prosperity. The areas, however, need not have the same shapes. It will be seen that each area is divided into halves by a narrow white line. This is to emphasize the fact that the first halves of areas below the XY line are really reactions from the extravagance, inefficiency, and corruption which existed during the latter half of the preceding prosperity area. Contrariwise, the first halves of area above the XY line are really reactions from the economy, industry, and righteousness developed during the hard times just preceding. The high points of the stock market have come in the early part of the prosperity areas, and the low points have come about the beginning of the depression areas. In 1914, the war held down prices of all securities. The highest price of bonds have usually come about the end of the depression areas and high money rates, and lowest bond prices at about the end of the prosperity areas. But what causes these fluctuations in business and prices? Statistics show that panics are caused by spiritual causes rather than financial, and that prosperity is the result of righteousness rather than of material things. Hence the importance to industry and commerce of the forces already mentioned. These spiritual forces are the true fundamentals of prosperity. This, in turn, leads us to consider from where they come, and upon what we are to depend for their further development. The following pages will give the answer. What are the sources of these fundamentals of prosperity? Where do we get this faith, integrity, industry, cooperation, and interest in the soul of a man upon which civilization is based? As already explained, we do not get it from raw materials. We have always had the raw materials. We do not get it from education. From a statistical point of view, Germany is the best educated country in the world. It has the least illiteracy. It has the largest percent of scientific culture. No, these three fundamentals do not come from education. They do not come from the inheritance of property. I mentioned in the preceding pages the investigation we have made of leading captains of industry in America, the men who had the various greatest industries in this country. Out of this group of men, only 10% inherited their business, while only 15% received special education. This shows that the source of these qualities is from something more than wealth or education. We are striving and even slaving to lay up property for our children, when statistics clearly show that the more we lay up for them, the worse off they are going to be. If statistics demonstrate any one thing, they demonstrate that the less money we leave our children, the better off they will be, not only spiritually and physically, but also financially. When it comes to the question of education, we work and economize to give our children an education and to send our children to college. Yet, statistics show that only a small percentage of these leading businessmen are college graduates. The success of individuals, the success of communities, the success of nations depends on these fundamentals: integrity, faith, industry, brotherly kindness, and an interest in the soul of man. To what do we owe these great fundamental qualities? Statistics show clearly that we owe them to religion. Yes, and to the old-fashioned religion of our forefathers. Moreover, I say this not as a churchman. I would give the same message if I was speaking to a group of bankers or a group of engineers. I was first brought into the church through the Christian Endeavor Society, but I was really converted to the Bible teachings through a study of statistics. To religion we owe our civilization, and to the church we owe our religion. All there is in the world today that is worthwhile comes from men filled with and from groups actuated by these fundamentals of integrity, faith, industry, brotherly love, and those other factors which come only through God. The church today deserves the credit for keeping these factors before the world. Hence, it is evident that the people of America have not the bankers to thank for their security and prosperity, but rather the preachers and the churches. To these men, we are obligated for our growth and development. End of chapter 9.